I'm Philip van der Velde. I work for the Flemish Waste Management Authority with the Dutch acronym OVAM. I'm a geologist. I used to work as a geologist, and now I've been working for 15 years in the OVAM, especially dealing with demolition and construction waste. The thing I first wanted to show you is a slide of the policy mix, the kind of things that we do as a government entity in trying to ensure first waste management, then going on to resource efficiency, and now we are attempting to try and see that we convert the linear economy in the Flemish region, which is in the northern part of Belgium, into an economy that by 2050 should actually be circular. Now, there are a lot of challenges in different spheres and in different sectors of the economy, but especially the construction sector is a very interesting case and is actually a very important sector to try and transform from a linear approach to a circular approach. There are a number of things, the end of waste criteria, bans on incineration, and a number of other things which are sort of things that need to be put in place, because when we are talking about waste, we can regret that there is such a thing as waste. But it is there, and it will still be with us for a very long time. I mean, the time before we will actually have technically the possibility to avoid waste completely, I think that's not really around the corner. So in the meantime, we must have good waste policies, we must have resource efficiency. So that means that of all these instruments that we have put in place, I think the one which is most important in the development of a circular economy is the last bit, which is actually trying to have a multi-actor governance of all parties involved in trying to develop policy. Not just civil servants, academics, and some behind-the-scenes negotiations that are taking place, but really interaction, trying to take into account, and as the previous speaker said, trying to share ownership of this transition with all the stakeholders, not just the companies, but also the users, people who need housing, both as buyers or as tenants, to make sure that we can take the necessary steps. I'm going to skip a few things. We started with the policy towards the end of the 1990s. We did this out of something which is very typical for Belgian people, out of envy of the Dutch. We have a very strange relationship with people in the Netherlands. We both dislike them, and we also have respect for what they do. And we are particularly happy when they don't make it to the European Championships in football, and we do. That was a double joy for us. But in the meantime, from having virtually nothing as recycling of construction waste, we have actually gone very far ahead, especially in the stony fraction. These figures are diminished a little bit because most of the reporting at European level is done at Belgian level, and our friends and colleagues in Wallonia and Brussels are in that sphere. Not really, the political importance of it is slightly less than in Flanders, for various reasons. We do actually have a number of things that we need to do. We need to adapt our housing stock, especially our housing stock, to resource efficiency, to energy efficiency, and to climate change. We also need to undertake major infrastructure works, because not as spectacularly as the Netherlands, but we also face the possibility of flooding, so we need to put up our flood defenses, which is also a part of an enlarged investment we will need to do. And we will need to look at our housing stock as a materials bank, because we are really almost completely devoid of any kind of resources. There is hardly any mining, and most of the materials that we use for construction, we have quite a lot of production of construction material, but almost all the raw materials are actually imported into the region. In addition, we will also face a demographic trend, which is going to cause us to have the two trends that will cause us to have more construction needed. First of all, we are actually going to have quite a lot of migration, especially intra-European migration, which has already taken place. At the level as the UK has had, we will probably also have that. But the most important thing is that we have thinning of the family structure, so that we need more dwellings with each its own bathroom, with each its own kitchen. So that will also have an impact on transport, utilities, and also the availability of space. As I said, we have hardly any resources, but we also face another problem. The housing market and the people who actually are the owners of buildings, or the people who initiate building projects, is more than in most European countries, it's individual families working with an architect and having a very individual approach to a house. For a Belgian family, the house that it builds is a sign of its identity, which, and I don't know if probably some of you might have visited Belgium, but there is no country where you have such an, at times considered ugly, mix of different type of buildings styles in one street. When you come from Belgium into the Netherlands, you can actually see the border physically. Belgium, there's a diversity of houses. The Netherlands, you know when you're in the Netherlands, when all the houses look the same. Now, from the point of view of resource efficiency and adaptations that are needed, there are two things that really play against the Belgian situation and the Flemish situation. You have to deal with individual households that need to take the decision to make the necessary changes. That's the first point. Second point is that because there is no standardization, the market for secondary building materials is virtually non-existent in Belgium. Because the dimensions, the specifications do not compile or are not compatible with the new design. So that is a very big problem that we face. And the third problem is we have a large percentage of home ownership, but a large fraction of that, and this is something which in the future should not be underestimated, this increase of the population that we expect is mostly to be found in people that are part of the weaker segments socially of society. People that will probably not get onto the property ladder. People that will not buy houses, will not renovate houses, and not build them. So there is going to be a shift. And today already we see that quite a lot of house owners do not have the necessary resources to undertake the renovations that are necessary, especially old people and people of feeble social background. Now, the European Topic Center has actually made an assessment of how to sort of estimate how far we are standing in the circularity of the economy. And this has to be done on a micro level and a macro level, and also has to look at the technical aspects, the technical changes that are needed in order to come towards circularity, and the organizational changes, the changes that need to be done at micro level, which is the companies, and macro level, which are societies and the economy as a whole. And then you can see that there are a number of assessments that need to be made. We need to look at the way that products are designed, and especially the interaction between different products. Today, a lot of building products are unified, are brought together into building units, in components of a building. And it is quite often, they are not really compatible, especially from the point of view of their ability to be separated from each other or reused. We need to look at business models. The thing is that if we are going to use recycled products, if we are going to use certain things again, it means that the whole earning model of most businesses will actually change. This is probably easier for largest companies to change, but the smaller companies that are usually subcontractors will actually face quite great difficulties. And we will need to make some kind of arrangements, we have to come to some kind of agreements, and there, for instance, especially on those parts, also on the design of the flows and all the necessary steps that need to be taken in the interaction within the value chain, coupled to the fact that this will need to be policed, this will need to be followed up. I think as government, and the OVAM has actually put forward for itself a role as facilitator. And this is coming back to this idea of joint ownership in trying to make sure that the changes in society, the changes in the way business is conducted, is actually conducive to the change from a linear to a circular model. For the construction, this means, and I'm not going to cite them all, there is an important aspect, which is the financing of building for the reuse of material and recycled material, and also to undertake all these energy efficiency measures. The first question that needs to be asked, for instance, is that do we need to continue renovating the houses? I think my personal belief is, and this is also something within the OVAM we also try to assess, people are quite often renovating for the wrong reasons. False economies, sentimentality, an idea that a house that is older than 70 years is historic and has got an historic importance. There I envy the Australians. They don't have this kind of sobby attitude to old houses. If it's worn, if it's down and out, they just knock it down. That is something which in Flanders is very difficult. I don't know how it is in other parts of Europe, but with us it's almost stifling. But there is the aspect of financing and the return on investment, the recovery of these high front-end costs. The banks always tell us, sure, that economy will be made, but they suspect that people will use that economy to take an extra skiing trip to Slovenia, which they never had the chance to do so. And that is where the banks are not certain that the reimbursement of the loan for this energy measure, this energy efficiency measure, will be used by the families to service the debt rather than to take an extra holiday. So the banks are reluctant because of the credit crunch. So those are things that will need to be addressed. Now, all this is brought into a policy program of materials management in circular building, in which together governments, all kinds of stakeholders from the sector but also outside the sector, have actually set a number of ambitions by 2020, which should fall into line and which should be a stepping stone towards a circular economy by 2050. So we want to reduce the virgin material use. We want to make sure that those materials that we recover, we use them for the right purposes. At the moment, our high recycling rates are unfortunately a lot of aggregates being used in foundation of buildings. Not enough in the production of new materials. We are faced with a very big problem, asbestos being the major one, of still a number of dangerous substances being present in building materials. Also harmless substances. Now, if we are going towards a circular approach to the use of building materials, we must make sure that at every stage where it's possible, we eliminate them, we take them out. But then we have to sit down and look at who is going to take the cost for this. The footprint of the design should be important. It was mentioned that the European Union puts a lot of emphasis on training the architects. Well, the architects, of course, at the moment, the way things are organized as being the leader, the manager of the whole building project, has to be convinced of the fact that he should choose in the design the options with the lowest footprint. But ultimately, it is true that we also feel that from having the responsibility only for the architects, we should move more towards building teams, people together. At the moment, the construction sector is not enough learning from its previous experience. It's almost like every single building project starts from a blank canvas. It's like we never built pyramids before. It's like we never built the Colosseum before. It's like we are every time reinventing the wheel, and that is a bit of a problem. The fifth is the building in modular and adaptability, which is in a number of action fields. I won't go into that. If you want to have more details, I can give you things like that. Now, the particular thing is that where we do face the most problems is not so much in the stony fraction, but is in the other materials that will also be released. This is like the plastics. Metals is not a problem. Wood is a problem. There are different types.
We turned off.
I turned off. Okay. But I hope you could still hear me. I'll try and be short. The non-stony fraction, there I think we really have a problem because there is actually a discrepancy within the value chain of people having to put in a lot of effort and incurring costs, like for instance the demolition companies. And other partners, like for instance the building material construction companies, having the benefits. And the repartition of the cost and benefits is something which is a challenge. And for that we have actually entered into a project which is the FISAC project, which is an Horizon 2020 project that looks at the possibility of value chain development and industrial symbiosis, where we would like to see that all partners actually sit together and exchange. Although I must say that sometimes I feel that the mistrust between different companies, and especially different sectors within the private sector, is larger than the mistrust I actually see projected towards me as a representative of the government. Sometimes I feel that businesses trust government more than people from maybe not their own sector, but other companies and from different sectors. There is a lot of distrust, and that will need to be overcome if we are going to work in a secular manner. This is about a tool that we are developing to actually help in the design process. We also put the emphasis on adaptable buildings, not just the fact that you can actually have an extension that can be removed, but also that when those materials need to be taken out or building elements have to be taken out, that they can actually be reused somewhere else. This is actually a major challenge and will actually help us towards. Now for the Flemish region, I want to end up on one particular problem which is very pressing in Flanders, which is not only we don't have enough resources, we also do not have enough space. 13,000 square kilometers with 6.2 million people. That's about 500 per square kilometer. If you look at the urbanization as it is now and the urbanization as it will be in 2050, it is an enormous urban sprawl. there is hardly any countryside left. This is the result of a disastrous anti-city, anti-urban attitude which started after the First World War out of fear of socialism and secularism in our political leaders, and wanted to give everybody a chance to live in the countryside. Now, this is costly for providing services, but it is also costing us a lot of traffic jams, air pollution, and other kind of things. But it means that, you know, we are going to have lack of space, and we have more and more clashes between the different uses of space: recreation, industry, dwellings, infrastructure. The city of Antwerp has been struggling for 20 years trying to come to some kind of agreement as to where they will put a new motorway. This has been put off for 20 years because they can't get to an agreement. Now, there is an opportunity. If you look at the site above, those are recorded black fields and brown fields. And for the future, what we want to do in trying to develop the circular economy also in the use of space, we want to have these old sites, these contaminated sites, in public-private partnerships, not only that they are cleaned up, that they're given a new use, preferably one on which there is common ground and agreement, but also that a number of the new building techniques, a number of the new concepts can actually be applied. And their government can be a facilitator by, like, for instance, providing these terrains on a leasehold. Now, leasehold is something which is a very common practice in, for instance, countries like the UK, but for Belgium that is fairly new, especially when it comes to housing. We have very few houses that are built on land that is not owned by the owner of the house. And there we are trying to see that we make those necessary steps. So, in short, in the Flemish region, we are working towards a circular economy, but we are trying to do it as much as possible in a multi-actor governance that is based on partnership and joint ownership of the entire transition process. Thank you.